morning. Happy Independence Day. I thought I would choose a different setting for my video today. You can see my very overgrown garden, very weed-filled and unkept. And it's already warm out. It's about 6:30 in the morning. Anyway, I'm going to do a review of John Adams by David McCullough, a book I've been wanting to read for at least, 18, 19 years. And it's my third David McCullough book. I've read 1776, which was excellent. And I love all his books. And I've read Mornings on Horseback about Teddy Roosevelt. And I've been meaning to read this for so long. So I really loved John Adams. Back when I was a teenager, I read Irving Stone's book, Those Who Love. And then there was a PBS series about him, not the more recent one that I have not seen, but I plan to now, which I think is based on this book, the 2008 one. But there was one like back, I don't know when it was, I was in my teens or early 20s. I remember I was at home watching it. But anyway, it was excellent too. And so I've always had a thing for John Adams. And I really think he embodies the best of what it means to be American. It's, the whole idea of self-government and the principles and the values of the Enlightenment, but in the best way. So I really have admired him, and this was a wonderful reading experience, and probably everyone else in the world has read it except for me. Well, and Alba has also read it because we read it together. And I really enjoyed it, but it was kind of a roller coaster emotionally because we'd gotten into reading it, and I was all set for it to be sort of a cozy read. But then George Floyd happened. There were all these protests. And it just made me, I really went through a period where it was kind of hard to read this because I was really mourning our country, because at the time, Adams was sacrificing so much. He had gone to France to try to negotiate a deal with them where they would come into a war and help us. And they eventually did. But it's probably mostly Benjamin Franklin that did it, because he really wasn't that good at the diplomacy bit. He had trouble getting on with the French. Benjamin Franklin was a big celebrity. They loved him, but he was kind of too plain-spoken and maybe abrupt. And, he was a descendant of Puritans. He was much better with the Dutch, and he managed to secure a loan from them that really helped. And he did partake in getting the French to help us. So he did a lot of really vital things. He's the one that nominated George Washington to be Commander-in-Chief of the Revolutionary Army, which was a brilliant stroke. So he did a lot of he really sacrificed a lot for his country. He did a lot. He had a very rough time once he got home and had to reacclimate. He was gone for years. He was in France, I think, for 7 years, and then he spent time in Holland, and then he was in England, where he basically was ignored because the English didn't want to. This was after we had won. They didn't want to have anything really to do with him. So it was very hard. He was away a long time, and when he came home, and Abigail was with him part of the time, but he was also separated from her for many years, painfully separated from her, because they had a very devoted marriage, and they were just great for each other. Abigail Adams was just a pillar of strength and clarity and charity. She just had a wonderful character, and he needed her. He loved her. She was his rock. So anyway, when he got back, he had to reacclimate, and that was very rough. And then he became a vice president, and the vice presidency was a really strange office. And it took him a while to get used to it, and he wasn't happy with it. And then when George Washington said he wasn't going to go for another term, he, not by a huge number of votes, he got elected president, but it's the only presidency where the vice president was of a different party. They changed that eventually. but Thomas Jefferson was his vice president. But Thomas Jefferson, by that time, they'd broken into parties, and Adams was like a moderate Federalist, and Jefferson was a Republican. Adams and Jefferson had been friends in France, but then it was really strained, and Jefferson, this is very pro-Adams, so you don't see, I mean, Jefferson was a complicated guy who was not, he had some strokes of brilliancy, but he was messed up too, and he was also sort of a backstabber, sort of he didn't want to confront people. He was diplomatic with them to their face, but then, behind their backs, he was doing other stuff. And so he worked against him. So he had his vice president actively working against him. So he had a rough time, and he kept us at peace with France during the Quasi-War. Which I didn't really know about, so that was really interesting to read about. But he kept us pretty much at the expense of his being reelected. And one of the things I learned about this book was how nasty the American press has been from the get-go. I mean, the most acrimonious, hyperbolic, nasty, it just a very, very partisan from the beginning. And Washington tried to avoid parties. He didn't want us to break into parties, and Adams was trying to stick to that, but it didn't. As we know, it didn't work, and it didn't work in his time either. I mean, it got really, really nasty. I mean, to the point where it basically wasn't that why Aaron Burr and Hamilton, did their duel. I mean, it was crazy. And it still is crazy today. So it made me realize that the press has always been a mess, and it's always, it's always been part of the fighting. What else did I want to say about this book? He just endured so much. His son Charles became an alcoholic and died. His daughter got breast cancer and died. He was really proud of John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams was always, everyone realized how gifted and smart he was. So he did live to see his son become president, which was very gratifying for him. When Abigail Adams dies at the end, it's very, very sad, because you really get a strong sense of her character and just what a gift she was, not only to him but to America. And she was really principled. I mean, she handled things like prejudice against blacks, and she was just so forthright and outspoken, and she had so much common sense and just a clarity of vision, what was true and what was good. So yeah, Abigail's great. So it was a really, really enjoyable book. It's very appropriate that I'm reviewing it today, because he died on July 4th in, I forget what year. I just read this. But he was a good man. He just so much wisdom at the end there, and his wonderful correspondence with Jefferson, and his correspondence with Benjamin Rush too. I didn't know that much about Benjamin Rush. That was interesting. So anyway, I really, really enjoyed this book. Very powerful book. It was a real roller coaster because of the times we live in, and how I wish I could erase. I want to go back in time and tell him, please, please focus more on the slavery thing, because it's really going to be a problem for this country you helped found and gave up so much for. Anyway, I highly recommend David McCullough as a writer, and I highly recommend this book, John Adams. So I guess that's it. So talk to you later. Happy 4th. Bye-bye.